Without leaning too hard into the current events of the Game Awards this year, it's clear to a lot of people that it was far too formal, and way more advertisements. Like, it just felt like so many ads, more than it ever had felt like before. But maybe it's actually the same amount of ads that it's always been. And this feeling is just us changing. Maybe we're finally understanding that what we need for games isn't support from marketing people who put all their projects first and value ad revenue over substance, but to actually hear developers' stories and those developers not be cut off with music at literally the worst possible times. Games, like many other ways we use to express ourselves, are forms of art. And I think it's time that we started pushing the industry more in this direction. Devs sharing their experiences of their game's creation and explaining what they went through to make that game exist, what it was like to live while making it, and you and me telling each other about our experiences, what aspects of a project that we liked and what aspects we didn't like, and why that might be the case. You know, what our playstyles leaned towards while we were playing it, learning about each other as humans, just hanging out. So with that out of the way, let's do this. In 2023, I played and finished more new games than I have in the past 3 years combined. And looking back, it wasn't like the previous year's games were soulless or anything like that. It was 100% a me problem. Consuming media is active work and takes effort if you want to actually process and internalize what you're consuming. And since 2020 was one of the worst years of my life, I didn't really feel like doing any of that. And a lot of neat games came out this year. So now that I'm back in the full swing of playing games and I'm not constantly thinking the world's going to end, my game of the year is... Actually, let's just start with the most underwhelming part of the video and then go from there. Go ahead and subscribe, click the bell if you haven't already. It helps me a lot. Or don't. I'm not your dad. The most underwhelming game that I played this year had to be Sonic Superstars. Like, there is a lot of cool stuff that Sonic Superstars does. Like fresh new boss fights, Chaos Emerald abilities that change the way that you platform, and Sega making levels actually, you know, playable. I know from discussion that I'm pretty alone in this sentiment, but I've said for years that Sonic games don't feel realistically beatable without an excess of deaths, where I'm just memorizing the routes and different obstacles and enemy spawns so I don't die. That's something that jumps into my path and kills me because I was moving so fast that I couldn't see it or react to it. But with a slower max run speed or a zoomed out camera, I can react to all of these kinds of obstacles. But hey, you know, don't worry, Sonic Superstars also does a lot of things that aren't good. We should have cool and intricate new level and enemy designs since we can see what's coming now, right? No, we don't. We still get these cutscene slingshots and gimmicky platforming, and Sonic Superstars is slower, so it shouldn't really be about storing up and releasing momentum anymore, because these moments now take up a lot more of your time and aren't challenging because of the game speed change. There are new and engaging mechanics, like in Cyberstation, where you play the level forward in Act 1, and then in Act 2 you have to do it backwards. It's really creative, but most mechanics aren't that fun or unique, like in Lagoon City, Sky Temple, or Cyberstation, where a bubble of the wind or zero gravity just pushes you at a snail's pace and you just have to avoid obstacles. What I'm trying to say is it doesn't really seem like Sega knew who they wanted Superstars to be when they made it. Like, it had an identity crisis, they had their hands in too many pots, tries to be a jack of all trades, ends up being ace of none, you know, take your pick. Next is Viewfinder. Now, personally, I've been obsessed with the idea of this game since this post hit Reddit years ago. It's a fresh, puzzling idea that picks up my brain in all the right ways, and the devs did a great job fleshing this idea out into a full game. The later puzzles always remember where the earlier levels come from, always utilizing their roots and kind of mirroring how the story is about remembering your roots and staying true to your nature. It's really, really well written that way. And I don't really want to give away too much because I loved almost every single puzzle the game gave me. So I'll just say that I had to be really creative about what the solution would be. Gameplay was brilliant, but it was also pretty easy and really short. And there's not that much dramatic tension until the final level of the game. Like, according to the story, the game wants you to feel like every level has been as stressful as the narrative that they've set up, and it's just not. Because there's no penalty for not solving a puzzle, and there aren't boss or gauntlet levels up until the final level shows up. So there's just not a lot of tension, even though the story kind of feels like the devs wanted it to be there. If there were more levels or more of them were gauntlets, I think it would be a better game. But, you know, for $25, it's not bad. Certainly lived up to my Reddit fantasies. Venba made me cry. And while I am a soft, sensitive boy, it doesn't mean that it's easy to make me cry. Venba's vivid story paints what it's like to be lost in a world with only your family and the small happy moments that you have with them to depend on. Struggling to find work, living meal to meal, moment to moment, it's crushing and emotionally difficult to read through, but it perfectly encapsulates how hard it is to raise a family, how cruel it can be to live in a foreign country, and experience the threat of cultural erasure. Even though I have never personally gone through any of these issues individually, you can see and feel how difficult it must have been to experience all three of them at once. Venba is pretty much only story and characters, and only around 2 hours long, but it makes up for the very little gameplay it has by being one of the most emotionally mature and grounded games I've ever played. It's all worth it. Now, okay, I really wanted Tears of the Kingdom to be my game of the year, but it's not. It's just not. And this probably seems out of left field for people that know me because I'm a Breath of the Wild lover. And yeah, I mean, I wanted Tears of the Kingdom to be my game of the year, but a huge issue that Tears had is that it gave you so many different tools to use that they all started to lose their value and luster.
You mean just like in Breath of the Wild?
Hey, who said that? It's different, okay? It's the thing that you hate about Breath of the Wild is different from what I'm talking about, okay? In Tears of the Kingdom, you get an ability called Autobuild, and in terms of user friendliness, it's great. It's perfect. Any creation you've made with Ultra Hand gets stored in a history queue, and provided you have the scrap resources to make it, you can remake that creation. This is a great idea, except this creates situations where the items and resources that you find on the ground or in chests surrounding challenges feel kind of worth less because you already have your super awesome chocolatey mega ability or weapon. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it is the same as Breath of the Wild. Oh, shit. The world to item ratio and relationships suffer because of the solution that the devs used to solve an accessibility issue. But conversely, if Autobuild didn't exist, people would probably complain that they have to rebuild things over and over. And you're complaining that you have to play the game? You're complaining making stuff is like one of the most fun parts of the game. Weren't the opening hours of the Great Plateau or the Temple of Time floating island, like weren't those like some of the most creative, magical moments you'd ever had in gaming? You know what? Whatever. I don't care. I don't even care. Next, you know, Pikmin 4 has a similar issue to Tears. Like I said, you get kind of tricked out with gear that's way too good for you, way too fast. Stronger Pikmin items and abilities that you get really early on make the rewards that you find in the wild seem like they don't mean as much because, you know, you're already overpowered. Look at you. You're above Pikmin. You're above Ochi. You're above this game. But hey, you know, despite the exploration-based power creep, both games are pretty fun. And the bosses are better than their previous iterations' bosses. And their stories are better than their previous iterations' stories, and there's a ton of game to play. Yeah, pretty good. Super Mario Brothers Wonder doesn't always have the most exciting gimmicks when you grab a Wonder Flower, and they might not always be, you know, about traditional platforming, but Wonder Flowers are always unexpected and almost always in great ways. And the music and animations and art style are all obviously lovingly crafted and pay homage to a lot of the older Mario games without, you know, focusing too much on it. And the game exudes so much confidence in who it is that most of the time, I forgave half of the Wonder Flowers for being auto-scrollers. It's also far more creative than any new Super Mario Brothers game that has ever come out, so... Cocoon also seems to be a favorite child of its developer. It has more polish and detail in its gameplay and graphics than Limbo or Inside ever could have hoped to have. And experiencing Cocoon's nested worlds inside of other worlds and playing its literal out-of-the-box puzzles is like eating a beautifully baked biscuit one layer at a time. Although Cocoon has a little too ambiguous of a story for it to have truly blown me away with, you know, what was going on, I couldn't really understand what they were going for, you know, which is not the same as the ending of Inside. You know, it blew players away immediately. They immediately knew why it was impactful. There was an incredible wow factor about the final hours and puzzles of the game that I couldn't shake off. Now, both of these games, I would definitely recommend playing both of them. Play Wonder and play Cocoon. All right, now, it's time for the heavy hitters. You're probably going to hear this a lot from me in this section of the video, that I love it when games go all in on their theme or motif and that tie into the gameplay, story, and characters. You have to have that theme seeped everywhere into your project. And these do it the best. Dredge. Most people would probably say the focus here in Dredge is fishing, but to me, everything in Dredge that stands out is about being at the mercy of the open sea. You can never completely avoid the harshness of its waters. You can only ever mitigate them. They'll come creeping back to you at one point or another. From the fish that you catch, to the seas that you sail, to the monsters that you'll come across. Which is why I'm okay with the player not being able to realistically navigate through some of the clearly late game areas without being a master sailor, despite the game technically being open world. Because Dredge has a valid point to make. Unless we are willing to change, willing to look at ourselves in a mirror and say, that's not who I am anymore, we will always be at the mercy of the sea. Listen, I was allowed to go anywhere from the outset of the game, but Dredge makes you understand that you, your ship, and even the characters in the game are never far beyond the sea's reach. And through this eerie narrative gameplay tie-in, I sought to explore more of this treacherous world and find out even more about myself. Play Dredge. It's great. It's time for Hi-Fi Rush. You play as some loser kid that can't get a job, that goes to an unemployment center to get a job, and they're like, you're best suited to be a garbage collector, and he still doesn't want that job. So then they give him a robot arm, and wait, oops, that wasn't supposed to get dropped there. Uh-oh. And oh no, his robot arm got synced with his iPod. Wait, but now he can fight really well. But wait, now he can be a rock star like he wanted to be. This game is like Kingdom Hearts if you told your players about revenge values and all the hidden shit that makes it impossible to play and actually had a coherent plot. It rules. The game's rhythm-based fighting and timing is tricky even after clocking 10 hours. But that's kind of the point. You can memorize all your combos and all of your rhythms all day long. You can practice, but at the end of the day, you fight in the moment. You have to dodge attacks in the moment. You have to be vigilant and you have to make the most out of your bad situation. And that's what Hi-Fi Rush is. It's like improvised jazz. You have these broken characters that are looking to put their lives back together despite the world being in turmoil and filled with people and forces that are constantly and consistently working against their cause and what they stand for. It's smart, it's fun, it's Kingdom Hearts, but it tells you about the mechanics. You know, the only thing I'd really change here are the mini games. Wait, it really is just Kingdom Hearts? Oh shit, I didn't write a Pseudo Regalia section. Pseudo Regalia is one of those games that I should have played months ago, but I just never really felt like I'd be prepared enough for the insanity that is the full game. Because during the Game Jam version of the game, I only ever speedran it, so I never had to deal with any of the really super hard platforming challenges. You see, it's the first 3D Metroidvania that I've ever seen focus solely on platforming. And in that platforming gameplay, I'd say it's like some kind of perfect mishmash of Hollow Knight and Mario 64. Like, look at that. The combat is pretty basic, but the platforming is so good that I don't feel really compelled to go into what could have been done to make the combat better. And because you could theoretically beat the game without getting all of the power-ups, you really get to play in whatever way suits your playstyle. Pseudo Regalia, other than the last game that I have here on the list, you know, the game of the year, is the epitome of sticking to your guns for an idea, for a motif, for a theme. Letting the player embrace their dreamlike creativity when platforming through the game's surreal, at first seemingly unscalable map. That's what I took from it anyway. There's a ton of goodies to find in hidden corners. There are a ton of platforming challenges to overcome. There are lots of awesome sights to see and a ton of charm in the game. And it's only $6. If you don't play this one, you're missing out. I'll come find you. You're missing out. I'll come into your dreams. You're gonna play this game. Y'all, this is the big one. Rusted Moss. Rusted Moss's hook is its grappling hook that you get as your first power-up. Now, I feel like more context is necessary here. Happy Squared tells Gamerant that Rusted Moss is a Metroidvania that has skill-based exploration and that they want to emphasize mechanics that are more like skill gates or creativity gates rather than just ability gates. Now, you're able to beat the game with nothing but your first power-up and I think an extra gun, because most of the traditional Metroidvania ability gates are instead just challenge gates. And you can do this because the traditional Metroidvania ability gates are replaced instead with skill gates, like Happy Squared says, that can be completed using your creativity and tools in your kit to get you from point A to point B, rather than, you know, point A being before a door and point B being after you destroyed the door with the missile, your missile-shaped key. You have these situations with really tall ledges and grass at the bottom of the ledges, and one of the abilities that you get is a high jump that can only be triggered while you're standing on grass. But you can also use your grappling hook to get through this obstacle. What this effectively means is that Rusted Moss can play like a traditional Metroidvania if you want it to, but it won't stop a player that doesn't want to backtrack or look for the right way to play a game. Designing this style of Metroidvania also means that if the player chooses not to get other power-ups, that they'll almost certainly get better with the main platforming mechanic of the game. And all the other power-ups will just make you stronger in addition to your core platforming utilities and tools. Oh, hey, that's neat. That's how Pseudo Regalia works too. The second factor in Rusted Moss that sets it apart from the other Game of the Year contenders is its story and characters. You know, for me, most games that draw me in, I would call charming. Earthbound, Cave Story, Undertale, Pseudo Regalia, Kingdom Hearts, Hi-Fi Rush. There are quirks and behaviors about the characters and the gameplay that make me want to watch them more, be around them more, hang out with them, root for them more. Rusted Moss is not one of those games. Rusted Moss is like a drama where I have no idea what will happen next. The main character doesn't really want to side with either of the factions that are present and working to change the world in the game. The main character has to work to understand them at a deeper level, and the side characters have to do the same with the main character, all while fighting each other off and protecting the things that they hold dear and principles that they value. And even then, it's not enough. There's too much bad blood, and the game is about making hard decisions. And in this way, through this through line, you can also piece together how to get different endings based off of the context of the game's ongoing story and character motivations. The compromise of the open world and Metroidvania gates, the mystique of the anger and the spite between characters, the platforming feeding directly into your ability to fight bosses better and more effectively. It's difficult, it's engaging, it's the funnest thing I've played all year. You have to play Rusted Moss. So yeah, that's it. The Rusted Moss is my game of the year. Go play it. It's like a perfect game. I think it's only hindered by some really silly glitches that forced me to have unintentional deaths sometimes. Like, what the and listen, I want to do more of these. I love talking with you all about games and my experiences and what they mean to me. And I also love hearing from you guys in the comments about what your favorite games of the year are, or what games you didn't like, or what games you're looking forward to in 2024. Now, I know I didn't actually play any of the Game of the Year nominees for the Game Awards other than Wonder and Tears, but the others just aren't games that, like, I'm into. What was your game of the year? Let me know in the comments. We can talk about it. I'll see you all next year. Hope you have a happy holiday, happy new year. See you next time. See you later. Goodbye. Bye bye.